Welcome to Assignment 6, Mold Making and Plaster Casting. So, this is a messy assignment, but it's fun. And it's not too terribly taxing, but it's something that you need to make enough precautions with that I am kind of dedicating extra instructions to. You don't have any artists to review this week. Instead, you're going to be answering questions in your attendance that are about about answering questions about the safety of this work. Sort of keeping things clean, keeping surfaces clear, keeping clothing clear, not getting things on carpet, not getting things down the drain. These are all things I will cover. But I also have this printout for you, or you can look at it on your computer screen. If you do look at it while you're doing this, though, make sure you have it a safe distance away from the dust and the liquid. And when it's done right, you should have no problems. It should be easy, but I want you to read all directions, carefully watch the video, and then get permission from your parents before you start. If they have any questions, show them this content, show them the video, but also tell them that they are free to email me, and we can have a conversation. Either I'll appease their concerns about the mess, or talk to them about alternative things to do. So please keep that in mind. This is your responsibility to be clean, to be responsible, and to clean up after yourself when you are done. So if you notice, first of all, I have a paper bag, or I have brown paper, not paper bag. You could use a paper bag, but I've supplied you. I made it even easier. I supplied you with this huge roll of paper. Most of you guys probably don't have a studio with cement floors that you can work in, but you might have a garage. And if it's nice out, and we do have some nice days coming up, I would encourage you to do this outside. If you can't, though, please find a place that is not carpeted to do this. Cover your work surface in brown paper, and if need be, even cover the floor. You have plenty of brown paper. You will use this for another project, so don't use all of it, but there's a lot on this roll. So it is definitely possible for you to cover an entire kitchen table and still have plenty to use afterwards. You are going to need the plaster. So you have this bag, and in it are two. I've already used one, so in it are two bags of plaster. They should be nicely sealed. That is plaster of Paris in there. You should have Play-Doh, any color, really. I just happen to have orange. Scissors, your bubbles, and powdered tempera paint. There's yellow, red, and blue. I'm using the blue. I used my red before. You can do things like mix the yellow and red to make orange or something like that. This is especially because this is paint. When you add water to this, this is tempera paint. So don't get it on your clothes. Don't get it anywhere but on this surface in that plastic bag. You are going to provide a couple of things too. You're going to look for small objects to cast. So something like this little baby doll hand is great. This little plastic skeleton. This could be problematic. It's very difficult. Imagine if I kind of encased this and then tried to pull it out. It would rip the mold. And you're going to see what I mean in a minute. I could probably press it, but even then, something that's has a little bit less like nooks and crannies would work well. I would probably need to be careful that nothing went in there. But you're going to look for somewhat simple objects that don't have something that will grab a mold. So trying to cast that is not the same as trying to cast this. If I was trying, let's say I was putting this down in a mold, this can come out nice and easily. This, however, it's very hard to have an object that has a hook and get it out of a mold. So think carefully about the object that you get. Also, don't get something that's porous, meaning like fabric. It's not going to work. It's porous. It's going to absorb and try to stick to the Play-Doh rather than sticking and releasing. Also, don't get something that's really nice. Don't grab that antique that Grandma gave you guys because it's going to get a little bit of Play-Doh and goop on it. and we just don't want to risk it. So stay with really simple, easy objects, but that have some kind of definition or profile in them. All right, then you want a cup of water, and then you want paper towels, which I forgot to get. I will go get paper towels. You can use napkins instead. You could even use this paper, although you're probably going to want something a little more absorbent. You can use an old rag or towel, as long as it's something that's a rag or not something that can get stained or messed up. And then you want disposable containers. You'll need about 3. One for this project, one for next week's project, and then one to put your remainder plaster in. So I have all kinds of things. An old cup, this thing that cupcake came in, mushrooms came in this, yogurt came in this. Doesn't have to be pretty, just clean out the food stuff. And then that will serve as your receptacle for what you're doing. So, once again, step number 1 is find a good place to do this. Someplace where you can be messy and it's not going to destroy something like carpet or, grout in a tile. You might think that your bathroom tile is safe, but really be careful if you have the tile that has grout, and between that grout can be absorbent. Having white plaster is maybe not so bad, but having the color in it will be. Either way, just be very, very careful. You could do this in a bathtub, provided that you do not put any of the plaster down the drain. So rule number 2 is plaster never goes down the drain. Ever, ever, ever. When you are at school in room 201, we actually have a special sink and a special thing on that sink that allows the minimal amount of plaster that we put down the drain to not clog it. But even then, we still don't put plaster down the drain. Even the stuff on our hands, first we wipe it off, then we wash our hands. So please do not put plaster down the drain. All right, so we have our floor covered. We're wearing old clothes. Do not wear your best clothes. Do not even wear your second best clothes. Wear old clothes. So here are some examples of what I've done before. I lost a little finger. Here's this baby hand. Actually, it was a different baby hand because it's opposite. This is this baby hand. And you can see some of the Play-Doh is still stuck to it. That is part of your labor, is to pick it off and clean off your mold, or your cast, I mean. So you can see that what I've done is stuck this into a container, wrapped this around it, and it took this out. And this is the negative space that was left that I poured the plaster into. So you can do a sculpture in the round, or you can do a relief. And this is where there's a flat piece. I actually smashed the Play-Doh in the base of the other half of this, and then smashed this on, pushed it in top, not really smashed, pushed it in, and then poured plaster on top. And now I'm still getting the Play-Doh out. So a relief or a cast that's in the round. The first thing you want to do is, with the object that you are going to cast, you're going to get a little bit of soap on it. This has glycerin in it, so that's why it makes such great bubbles, but also why we're using it is that glycerin, it's not phenomenal, as you can see from this one. This one was without any mold release, and we're using this as mold release. But it helps a little bit. And then I'm going to take my Play-Doh, and I'm going to smash it around. I don't want it to poke out anywhere, but I'm going to make sure that it makes a nice contact with this piece. And then I'm going to put it into my container. And I will slightly, slowly wiggle it out. I want to be careful not to rip the mold. It's hard. Play-Doh is not like the stuff, so you can see that a little bit came out. So my mold is going to have a kind of a strange, the fingers are going to be attached together. That's okay for this project. When we do this in room 201 on campus, we have a better casting compound. We either use alginate for life casting when we cast our hands, or we use silicone that's much stronger and dries actually around the object and allows us then to release the object without this kind of weirdness. The cup is just to hold things. Do not use this. This is actually a really thick cup. It is hard to cut it apart, because later on we're going to have to cut this apart. It's hard to cut that apart, so do not use the Play-Doh cup. Another way to do this would be to use, that one's dry. Another way to do this, horrible noise. And you can see that I use this Play-Doh more than once. Another way to do this, if you don't want to do it in the round, you want to do the relief version, which for what we're doing probably will work better. Just because of the limitations of Play-Doh and all the other things, is to press this into whatever container you have, a shallow container. Try to get it as even as you can. And then, once again, I'm gonna get my little guy, get a little bit of soap on there, and I'm gonna press this in. Whatever shape you have, whatever object, just make sure that you get pressed in nice and firm, and then very carefully and slowly peel it out. So as you can see, that was a much easier release method than the one I did before. So now I am going to use my mold release. Now normally once again, room 201, mold release is a spray that we spray in a mold. It's kind of like greasing the mold so that things release easily. In our case, this is much safer, much more realistic, and we're going to just pour a little bit of it around. It's just soap with the glycerin on it. And so I am just kind of greasing up the whole mold, and then I am dumping it out. I'm even going to dump that out while I do my next step. So again, I'm greasing up the whole mold. And I'm going to kind of drain out onto my paper so that there's no weird bubbly stuff in my cast when I do it. So I'm going to clean things over for a bit so you can see the next step very clearly. Now I'm ready for my plaster. Set that open. And I'm deciding to use the blue tempera paint, but I'm going to very carefully open this up. I don't dust everywhere. I'm going to kind of get it down in there. Close this back up. And I'm going to seal that. I'm going to mix it up. You do not have to add color. You may continue to keep yours white. That is absolutely fine. I am completely fine. I just wanted to give you guys the option of adding color. It actually turns your piece into chalk, depending on how much color you add. You can even see there's a little bit of dust already rising because I set that down too hard. So now we're going to add small batches of water. So you want 1 cup of water, but you want to add it very slowly. I'm going to add a little bit more. Going to smush it around. Do this in batches because what you're going for is something akin to pancake batter. If it's too thick, it won't pour into your mold. If it's too runny, It'll be kind of a weak plaster cast. It might break. It'll take a while longer for the plaster to evaporate. The other thing that to remember is that plaster starts setting once you start adding the water. So this isn't something that you can do and then walk away for a while, go watch a movie, play a video game, and then pour your mold. Once you add the water, it's go time. So I'm just kind of getting rid of the bubbles that I feel in here. It's getting there. It's not quite. It's very close. I might not actually use this whole cup of water. Yeah, I'm not going to. This is great. So I'm going to mix it up real good, make sure I don't feel any lumps. Make sure things are nice and even. I do have a little lump there. All right. So that is nice. And so I would actually say you're probably going to go more towards, because mine's almost a little tiny bit watery. Probably just going to use 3/4 of a cup. But it can depend on the moment, the atmosphere, if you have a slightly higher than 2 cup count of plaster in your bag. So now what I'm going to do is I'm sealing up the top, but I'm also grabbing, notice how I'm holding it. I'm just being really careful so I don't turn this over and maybe I didn't seal it properly and it falls out. But I'm also turning it so that I have a corner that is exposed. I'm going to turn my molds back over. You only have to do one. I am doing 2 to show you both kinds, but you only have to do one. I'm going to cut the corner off. Not a huge gaping hole. This is like icing something. It is so that we can pour this ever so slowly, and I don't want to dump a ton in right away because I want the air to escape. So I'm trying to slowly fill up my mold, and I'm going to even give it a little bit of a base, just like this guy has. See how that has a base? That's because I over poured it like that. And then on this guy, I can just fill in the whole piece. You want it somewhat thick. If it's too thin, it'll crack. So I'm going to make mine nice and thick. Going over the edge a little bit. So I have a little bit of plaster left over. What I want to do is you've got actually 2 options. You are going to need to, next week you are required to do this again, but not make a mold. You're just going to cast a brick. However, I've also supplied you guys with chalk that you can carve instead, because we're going to do plaster carving. So this is for next week. Or you can make your own plaster shape and just fill some kind of container. Of course, I picked a container that was probably not the best idea. But it's always a good idea to just kind of get rid of the extra plaster in some kind of container so that you have it available for next week. Then what you want to do with the rest of your bag is take it and put it, you can either put it in some kind of container or you can put it back in the original plastic bag. I know this looks very wasteful. It's better than destroying furniture or homes though. Do not dump any of this down the sink. It goes in here. You can just leave it. It'll eventually dry and then you can put it in the garbage can. Sealing it up is a good idea, having a one that you can seal up. Still, and since you have 3, you should more than likely use that first one that everything came in to seal up and throw things out. That way you're not wrecking anything. And this looks like it had a hole because it's leaking, which is okay. If you get something like that, just leave it. It's not going to drain, probably won't drip out profusely, and it'll slowly harden and seal itself up. So the last thing to do then, before you clean up, is give these a little bit of taps. That allows any air bubbles that got trapped when you pour to escape. And then, in the end, 24 hours from now, you will pull this out slowly. You might, with something like this, have to cut it, do a little surgery to get it out. You can even cut the bottom and then slowly peel it away that way. Once you have it out, you are going to take the Play-Doh off, and then you're going to have the fun job of going through and picking off all that Play-Doh, getting it as clean as you can. The more dry, the earlier you do this project, the easier it'll get, because the Play-Doh gets more and more dry. Eventually it will. I've had this sitting around for a week, so, or maybe even 2, so the Play-Doh is still a little soft, but as time moves on, that Play-Doh is going to dry up and fall away. This is a lot easier to clean than it was before. I can even get a little sharp thing and clean it out. When you are done, you are going to release this mold, just as we saw. I'll show a little bit of a video that was for these 2 pieces. And then you are going to take a photograph or a video of it and upload it to VoiceThread. Before you do that, remember, when you are done, you're going to dry or wipe as much of this off your hands as you can with a paper towel, paper, or a rag. You are going to set these aside somewhere, preferably on paper, someplace safe where they won't get knocked over. And then you are going to take all of this paper, fold it up, and put it in the garbage along with this. Make sure that everything is safely disposed of so that you do not, none of this is toxic. When I say safe, I don't mean unsafe for breathing, although you wouldn't want to sit there and hold your head over a bag of plaster Paris. The dust fumes are bad for you. But in this quantity, in this way, this is all very safe, inert process. Everything, that's why we're using Play-Doh and bubbles and things like that. It's very safe for the home. But I mean safe by not damaging the things that you live in. So not your carpet, not your sink. So be very, very careful. And when you're done, clean off all the things that have the Play-Doh on it so that doesn't get gooped anywhere. And then, wait 24 hours, release your molds, and then upload the results. Once again, next week we are going to be doing plaster carving, so it is good to have an extra piece. That's why you have a second bag. You might as well take this time to mix up some extra plaster and make yourself a plaster brick, which is the same process we just saw, just filling a container like this with plaster, or like this, or like this, and just letting it dry so that you can carve into it. But we do have an alternate for carving if that doesn't work out. All right, happy casting.